I think I'm up and running. Okay, so let's see what I got. Bunch of dang emails. You don't want to see that. So there's this one, and I think I need AP Government 1. No, I need AP Government 2, so let's see if we see that on there somewhere. Dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it. There it is. Okay, so that's coming up. All right, so we're going to do policy first. That's the first thing on this unit. And then we'll do the civil liberties. Okay, so policy comes down like at the bottom of this thing somewhere. Almost to the bottom. Look at that. Boom. All right, pretty close. Yeah, I think. Let's see what we got. I think that's where we're starting. Let's see if that's it. Yeah. All right, this is it. That thing takes forever, so I'm going to leave it like this and tell you about it. Okay, so if you missed for any reason, I'm going to try to get it all in here. One big video, I believe. Public policy is it's what the government's going to do. So look at that, specific course of action followed by the government. It's anything the government's going to do about some issue, whether it's healthcare, immigration, minimum wage, poverty, whatever it is. Politics is the interaction of people with the government. And our official, I'm not sure if I like it. It's kind of a bottom line kind of definition, Machiavellian kind of definition, but political science, study of who gets what, when, where, why, and how. In other words, you got a bunch of power struggles, who's winning them. That's political science, the study of that stuff. Why did Trump win? That's what political science studies. Okay, so there's a couple of types of public policy. First going to be distributive, or there's several types. That's something that everybody likes, like national parks, like Yosemite right there. So that's Yosemite. You pay your fee to go to Yosemite. Hey, everybody benefits from it. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, young or old, whatever. There's no ethnic difference in who's benefiting from Yosemite. So everybody kind of likes it. Air traffic control. We all benefit if planes don't crash, especially people who fly planes. Redistributive program or more Robin Hood kind of things, anti-poverty programs, so those, as we know, are more controversial. All right, let's go. All right. Redistributive or zero-sum games. In other words, somebody wins, somebody loses. If one side wins, the other side's going to lose. Counter-distributive are things like taxes that take from everyone. So distributive programs give some sort of benefit to everyone. Counter-distributive either takes away a benefit like a program cut or increases people's taxes. All right, so there's the questions to go with it. Now on this thing, remember what I do? I just kind of sit here. I take a break because I'm fixing to teach the whole dang unit on one video. So if you decide you're not getting enough time on a pause, hit pause button on the video and look at it and go back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. There's 8 official steps to public policy. I feel like 8's a little high of a number, so I suggested to you that you class it to 5 or 6, but you decide how you're going to handle it. Step 1 is admit there's a problem. So if we're looking at the Trump presidency, is immigration a problem? Well, that's something that I've had arguments with people about. Is it a problem? Not is it an issue, is it a problem? If it's a problem, it's something that needs to be addressed. That's step 1. Number 2, getting on the agenda. So think tanks, research stuff. And so if it gets on the agenda, that's step 2. I think I've recorded this already because I did my little joke about my dad there looking like this guy. But we'll keep going. Number 3, decide to act on it. So PAD, is it a problem? It gets on the agenda, decide to act. And what happens is people get fired up about something, then you run into problems like right now. Everybody got fired up about Obamacare. Now what do? And sometimes the interest declines and you don't actually do anything about it. All right, there's the questions. Do what you got to do, go back and forth. Feel free to ask me questions if you need to. All right, next. I won't worry about trying to get the numbers, the heading numbers to add up. How much are you going to do? You're going to go incremental. That's a little bit. So Medicare and Medicaid were incremental healthcare reforms. The DREAM Act would be an incremental immigration reform, something small, and that's easier to do. Comprehensive reform is going to be going big time. Dramatic change in what the government does costs a lot of money, and that's a harder thing to do. All right. When you're deciding how much to do, you got to look at. You're trying to get something done. You're always dealing with iron triangles. So we've seen iron triangles before. It's the congressional committee, the bureaucratic agency, and the interest groups. There's the diagram of it right there. Absolute certainty that's going to show up on the AP test. Issue networks add a little bit to that. So in addition, on healthcare, you might have different healthcare companies, insurance companies, different groups that benefit, and in addition to just the main three. And they're temporary. They're not iron. So the same three is always going to be involved in an iron triangle. Issue networks, some groups kind of come and go as an issue changes. Stage 5, you got to choose a tool. You might spend money on a problem. You might raise or lower taxes. You provide goods and services directly. Healthcare is a service. Protection against risk. And some sort of insurance, like what is it? The FDIC provides protection against the risk of a bank closing down. And standards or incentives or penalties, especially one of these is it's called cap and trade. And factories they don't have to pay as high a taxes if they only emit so much. So it's like an incentive not to put too much smoke in the air. Questions? Pause it if you need to. Okay, stage 6, who's going to do it? So it could be the federal government where nearly 2 million people work, or it could be a business. Lockheed in Georgia builds a lot of weapon systems. Boeing does too. So, businesses do things for other government. Colleges and universities do research. State and local governments do almost all the things that we encounter concerning the government, pick up our trash, provide our water, that sort of thing. Charities help anti-poverty programs, the Red Cross, the VAC, help take care of folks who are struggling. Then you got this thing, rules. Once a law's been passed, the bureaucracy will turn these things into a rule. How do you carry out this particular law? There's an immigration law. Trump hasn't changed the immigration law. He's changed the rules as to how you're going to carry out immigration law. Under Obama, you had to commit a crime. You had to do something. You had to get a DUI. You had to beat somebody up. You had to do something bad. As long as you didn't do something bad, they kind of leave you alone before you got deported. Under Trump, just about anybody is subject to deportation. So they've come up with a new rule for how you're carrying out this law. They put the rule in this book called the Federal Register, and there's hearings over the rules just like there is for laws. Bureaucracy may not carry out a law. Remember Brown versus Board Education, supposed to integrate schools. It took 20 years to integrate schools. A court may step in and declare a rule unconstitutional. So the courts are involved as well. And then finally, you run the program. The agency runs the program, and then as new problems come up, they try to address those. And I'd say that takes care of it. All right. We are now going to civil liberties. And I'm going to try to do the entire civil liberties thing in not too long. Let's see if we can hit this thing and make it full screen. I always have. I'm now crossing my fingers and so forth. Looks like I did it. Nope, but that's not where we want. So let's work our way up. Oh, don't be that way. Okay. Freedom of religion is the first civil liberty. A civil liberty, when we're talking civil liberties, you want the government to leave you alone. So we want the government to kind of leave us alone concerning religion. All right, so it says, the First Amendment says these two things. There's two clauses about freedom of religion. First, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. That's called the Establishment Clause. Nor shall Congress make any law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. That's called the Free Exercise Clause. Establishment Clause, there it is again. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion means, at least according to kind of the strict interpretation of this thing, government can't favor one religion over another, and it shouldn't favor. Almost everybody believes that first part, but more liberal judges say you shouldn't favor religion over non-religion either. Don't even encourage people to be religious in any way. The phrase separation of church and state does not appear in the Constitution. It is associated with Thomas Jefferson, who talked about a wall of separation between church and state in a writing of his that is today put in something called Notes on the State of Virginia. But the phrase separation of church and state doesn't appear in the Constitution. Okay. Our court case over religion's Engel versus Vitale. Every morning, this New York elementary school opened the school day with a prayer. And if kids didn't want to pray, they could go outside. But the Supreme Court ruled that that's tax money, paying that teacher that's saying, okay, we're going to pray, and that there's subtle pressure on the kids to go along with it. Everybody's going to talk about them if they go outside every day. All right, so we have this cheerleader sign held by LFO cheerleaders. This was in the news in the year 2006, I'm going to say 2006 years ago, 2011 or so. Okay, there's your questions. Okay, and what happened was cheerleaders didn't get to put up their sign anymore. They had the sign up every year since 9/11, then somebody complained. And so the court case that tells you whether or not a government-sponsored activity is called Lemon versus Kurtzman, and it provides this thing called the Lemon test. So number one, it's got to have a secular, non-religious purpose. The purpose of this thing is to get the crowd fired up. That in turn gets the football team fired up. So that's secular. Have no excessive entanglements with religion. Can't feel religious. Well, clearly this feels religious, and for that reason, it doesn't meet the limit test. Can neither encourage nor discourage religion. Obviously, this is encouraging religion. So again, for reasons 2 and 3, the sign doesn't pass muster there. Now, we do this on occasion with our signs, and when we do, we pay a fine to GHSA. So the penalty for violating this thing is a little fine. So it's not like you go to prison forever and ever, something like that. It's just one of those not very bad illegal activities. Okay, teaching evolution. Scopes Monkey Trust is like the first church-state government issue in the 20s. Scopes taught evolution. There was a law against teaching evolution in Tennessee. And Scopes taught it. But since then, the court has ruled that in science classes, you can't teach competing theories. It's got to be evolution. You can't teach Adam and Eve and Genesis because that's a religious theory, and that would be promoting religion. Okay, the government's inconsistent about this stuff. We say under God, one nation under God every morning, and that's a taxpayer-funded activity. In inaugurations, both Trump and Obama's, there's big long prayers. That's paid for by the taxpayer. It says, "In God we trust" on the coins, minted by the National Treasury. Some of the founders were very religious. Some of them were kind of liberal on religion. So it's hard to make a generalization about the founders. Whoop, there we go. The Teddy Roosevelt thing was just a motivational deal. I don't think that's key to the test itself. It's just kind of interesting stuff. You can take a look at it if you'd like. Maybe the first one. So some folks were saying, well, that's taking away the cheerleaders' freedom of religion if they can't make the sign. So in other words, there is a tension between Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. 10 Commandments allowed on the Texas lawn because it's seen to be a historical plaque as opposed to this that's clearly religious. Okay, free exercise. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. So you can do whatever you want in church as long as it's legal outside church. The only absolute freedom that you have is freedom of thought. Nobody can change what you think. So in church, you're allowed to kill chickens. Why? Because we have Chick-fil-A, we have KFC. You're allowed to kill chickens outside church. Guys who don't have religious reasons for not going to war can get conscientious objector status if they can convince the authorities that they're being sincere. In the case of Wisconsin versus Yoder, it was determined that the Amish faith was endangered by forcing their kids to go to school, go to public high school, so they're allowed to drop out early. If so many of these Amish become non-Amish, there won't be Amish anymore, so Amish won't have the freedom of religion. There won't be an Amish church to go to. Okay, what can you not do? You can't smoke peyote on the job. A couple of Native Americans tried to smoke it, and they claimed First Amendment freedoms didn't work out for them. Polygamy is not allowed. Muhammad Ali tried to get conscientious objector status. The government didn't believe him. Snake handling is not allowed. A kid could get hurt there. And kids have gotten hurt in snake handling services. Okay, well, there we go. Okay, freedom of speech. So what you say can't hurt anybody. If you say if the mafia boss says go whack that guy, that's not allowed. The court case that goes with this thing is Shank versus the U.S. And in 1917, during World War I, this guy named Shank was convicted of passing out leaflets urging people to dodge the draft and got thrown in prison. He said, wait a minute, this is freedom of speech. And he lost because of this fella, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who came up with what was called the clear and present danger test, which says you can't say something that is clearly going to get someone hurt right away, such as shouting fire in a movie theater. Okay, the importance of speech is necessary for 3 reasons. Necessary for the protection of other rights. Martin Luther King needed freedom of speech to speak out against racism. Self-expression, you don't want people telling you, what to think, what to say. Marketplace of ideas, we're all better off if all the smart people who disagree on stuff get to make their point. It allows us to think about things in different ways if all the ideas are being expressed. Kind of inconsistent speech case in Dennis versus the United States. This fellow Dennis and 10 others got convicted of being communists, and they stayed in prison. The reason being that communists are trying to overthrow the government and don't believe in freedom of speech themselves. Brandenburg versus Ohio, the court updated the clear and present danger test, and now it's imminent lawless action. So we got to know exactly when somebody's going to get hurt. So this Nazi guy said, hey, let's overthrow the government sometime. Well, that's not clearly enough. It needs to be next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. This was a unanimous decision by the court. When it's unanimous like that, you don't need a majority opinion. There you go. You want to add the Dennis and the Brandenburg case to that. Okay, symbolic speech. Flag burning's allowed. This guy was protesting Reagan back in the 80s, and the Supreme Court, including Scalia, ruled that it was a form of symbolic speech. In the Tinker case, that's Mary Beth Tinker, and she's wearing this anti-war peace symbol. And again, the court ruled you can do that. That's allowed. The school system can't prevent them from wearing that armband. It doesn't disrupt the school day. On the other hand, a draft card interferes with government operations, and so whether you're saying something or not, you're not allowed to burn it. Okay, freedom of assembly. The government can tell people where their march is going to be, when it's going to be, the conditions. They got to make sure that that the police are involved. So it's not going to be at 8 or 5 o'clock. You're not allowed to burn a cross in somebody's yard. You're not going to have it at school because that'd be a big distraction. Can't regulate content. The court case that goes with this is the Skokie case. National Socialists versus Skokie, Illinois. Skokie tried to prevent the Nazis from marching in their heavily Jewish town because a fight might break out, but the court ruled that no, you're not worried about the fight, you just don't like the Nazis, so the Nazis were allowed to march. So here we have an African-American policeman, looks like to me, having to escort the Klan, on this Klan march. All right, so there you go. And here we go. So we got freedom of the press. So libel is the crime of knowingly printing lies about a public figure, and slander is the crime of knowingly telling lies about a public figure. So you can't lie about a public figure in such a way that it's going to hurt their reputation. It's called actual malice. I believe I put it on the next slide. Notice Trump. I've got Trump here on the slide. Sometime in January or so, I'm going to say, he talked about making it easier to sue somebody for libel or for slander. Okay, so first off, lies have to harm your reputation. If you run for Congress and I say, I know for a fact that you have a pet dog, when in fact you don't have a pet dog, well, that doesn't hurt your reputation. So it's got to be actual malice, is the phrase that always gets used on the test. They're hard to prove. It's pretty easy to make the case that, in fact, you thought the thing you were saying was true. Prior restraint means that the government can't prevent newspapers or TV shows from publishing something before it gets published. You can sue them afterwards, but you can't prevent them. Nixon tried to prevent the publication of the Pentagon Papers during Vietnam, and these Pentagon Papers said, hey, Johnson knew. He knew we were going to lose even at the beginning when he's sending troops in, but he lied about it. So that's going to make the government generally look bad, so Nixon didn't want that to happen. So he tried to prevent the New York Times from publishing it. He couldn't do it because that would be prior restraint. There you go. Okay, this is new teaching. I hadn't taught this to anybody just yet, but we're talking about due process here. Due process is the steps that the government has to take if it's going to take somebody's rights away. So, you know what they are. You got the right to remain silent, then you got the right to a lawyer, then there's a hearing where they plead guilty or innocent, then there's a trial, and there's a sentencing phase. So it's all these steps. At least that's the procedural due process. It's based on the Fifth Amendment's due process clause, which says the federal government shall deprive no person, notice that's a person and not citizen, of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. One of the things going on with immigration is that immigrants are getting deported without a hearing. And so their lawyers are raising the question as to whether or not that's violating the Fifth Amendment's due process clause. Military tribunals also doesn't go through all the steps of procedural due process. Okay, so way back in Middle Ages, you had trial by ordeal. Here you have procedural due process. Another word we might use in our history, we've got judicial punishment without due process, and that's called a lynching. Okay, there's also something called substantive due process that liberals agree with that conservatives don't. And that is the notion that unfair laws, if a law is not fair, that violates civil rights or civil liberties, that can be thrown out as violating the substance of due process. Scalia and other conservatives don't believe in substantive due process. Seems to be loose construction. Okay, 14th Amendment applies due process to the states. It says that the state shall deprive no person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. So 14th Amendment is during the Reconstruction years. We learned that as the Civil Rights Amendment. So the concern that Congress has when it's getting this thing passed is that southern states are passing Jim Crow laws and lynching people and that sort of thing. Over time, the Bill of Rights has been applied to the states, and so that process is called selective incorporation, and we're going to see that pretty soon. That'd be a separate slide, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it because everybody forgets it. The rights selectively get incorporated to apply to the states. Or maybe we should say the states selectively get incorporated into Bill of Rights requirements. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. There you go. Okay, here we go with the controversial stuff. Birth control. So Griswold, so we're talking about the right to privacy. Birth control has been illegal in Connecticut since 1849. And Connecticut's a Catholic state. The Griswolds opened a Planned Parenthood clinic right there. And they knew it was against the law. They were challenging this law. So the court ruled that people have a right to use birth control. That's pretty, uncontroversial, the right to take birth control pills and that sort of thing. And the court ruled that we have a right to privacy implied by the 9th Amendment. You remember, power to the people, just because it's not in there doesn't mean it's not protected. So just because the word privacy is not in there doesn't mean you don't have it. We don't want the government listening on our phone calls, that sort of thing. And also the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. No state, or the state can't deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. So it's based on those two amendments and implied by those two amendments. Okay, so there's the abortion case, Roe versus Wade. Her name was actually Norma McCorvey. She just died. She died pro-life. Let's get rid of that dang. I always do that. And abortion. See if I can get the presentation back up there. And it was in Texas. Texas had a law against abortion. She wanted to have an abortion. And in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that Texas couldn't prevent her from having an abortion. And it's based on the right to privacy. Okay, so it's legal. States can't outlaw it. A lot of people in Georgia are pro-life, but it's legal. Abortion is legal in Georgia. When Reagan became president, conservatives thought that he was going to get rid of abortion, that the court, the Supreme Court, with judges on there appointed by Reagan, would get rid of it. But all they did was they regulated a little bit more. So in Webster versus Reproductive Health Services, the court ruled that life begins at conception, which seems to suggest you're going to outlaw it. But they didn't say at conception that this form of human life was a person with rights. But they also said that taxpayer money shouldn't go to pay for abortions. Planned Parenthood versus Casey is the second one. It was a Pennsylvania law signed into law by a Pennsylvania pro-life Democrat. Bob Casey, I believe, was the name of the governor. And so it made it harder to get an abortion, but it still upheld Roe versus Wade. So if you're under 18, you have to have parental consent before having an abortion. Or if you're an emancipated minor, you got to get consent of a judge. There you go. And there we go. Okay, more free expression stuff. Another regulation of expression is there's such thing as obscenity. Obscenity is defined by community standards. So in other words, guess what? We don't have a strip club in Calhoun. Well, why not? Because the community has deemed that a strip club is obscene. It's not decent. So once you get Atlanta, hey, there's strip clubs. Here in Calhoun, nope. And so the court ruled that different communities could decide what was obscene and not obscene, and so obscenity is not protected as free speech. All right, in the case of Gittler versus New York, 1925, I believe, is the year free speech is incorporated to apply to the states. So now states can't take away freedom of speech anymore. Another regulation of free speech. Your mama. If you're in a bar and you say your mama, or you say you're a wimp and it starts a fight, well, you can get in trouble for the words you said that caused the fight. That's called fighting words. So let's think. Clear regulations on free speech. Clear and present danger, imminent lawless action, obscenity, and fighting words. 4 different regulations. Recent Establishment Clause cases. Under a more accommodationist, pro-religious court, recent years, this young lady was allowed to go to like a private school using taxpayer money. It was for a secular purpose. You know, the Cleveland is in Cleveland, and the public schools were seen as dangerous there. So she felt like she wasn't getting the equal protection of the laws if she couldn't go to a better school. Okay. Santa Fe versus Doe. No student-led school prayers at football games. So can the coach do it? No. Can the cheerleader coach do it? No. Can the students do it? No. Now, does it happen? Yes. But that's the Supreme Court ruling. Last 2 of them, New York Times versus Sullivan. Is the case where where the court ruled you got to have actual malice for it to be liable. It was a civil rights era case. Then Sullivan said the New York Times was hating on him, that he was like a Klan member. And the New York Times defense was, well, we kind of thought he was a Klan member. He was like a Southern sheriff. So, yeah, we got some stuff wrong, but we didn't realize we were getting it wrong. Lawrence versus Texas, 2003 case. You're allowed to be gay. It's legal to be gay. States can't outlaw. It was against the law to be gay in Texas up to 2003. Not gay marriage, gay. All right, so hey, there's a good matching section, so I'd stop it and match them. All right, and I think, let me look here. How many more do I have? Yep. All right, I believe I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to do this heading and stop. I can't tell if this is where I'm going to stop for the test, but that's kind of my goal. I'd kind of like to give the test like middle of next week. So maybe for the gold day class is Tuesday, and then the black day class is Wednesday. We're bowling Friday, so that'd work out pretty good. We'd have the test before bowling. All right, so let me do this. Let me do this heading. So the Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment's a big amendment. So we learn no self-incrimination. The Miranda rights are based on the Fifth Amendment. Miranda versus Arizona. So that's the guy. He confessed. He didn't get his rights read to him. They let him go in class. Well, it's on the test. They let him go, and so he got in a bar fight, and he got killed in the bar fight. They arrested the guy that killed him, and ironically enough, what they do, they read the guy his Miranda rights, named for the guy that he killed in the bar fight. So that's kind of ironic, isn't it? Double jeopardy. You can't get put on trial twice for the same thing. So what? O.J. Simpson got found not guilty at that point of murder. At that point, they couldn't put him on trial again. He's now in prison for something else. And a lot of people felt like the judge was kind of getting around double jeopardy in that case. There's also a kind of neat movie about double jeopardy. All right, due process for the national government. The national government can't take away life, liberty, and property of any person without due process of law. And no trial in a federal case without a grand jury. That's a grand jury. It's a group of citizens decide whether or not there's going to be a trial, not whether or not you got guilt or innocent. Okay, Sixth Amendment has 3 things. Speedy trial, we learned that last year. The right to counsel. So that's Gideon versus Wainwright. This guy got convicted of robbing a pool hall. And he couldn't afford a lawyer, and he went to prison. So then he starts studying the Constitution, and he sees that one of the things the Sixth Amendment says he's got a right to counsel. So he got a lawyer to argue. That meant he had the right to have a counsel appointed if he couldn't afford one. So that's where an appointed counsel comes from. Also, the right to confront witnesses. You're in there in the courtroom while somebody says you did it. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. So it's the Fair Punishment Amendment. No excessive bail. You get put in jail, they can't give you $1 billion bail while you're waiting for the trial. No excessive fine. You get pulled over not having your seatbelt on, they can't give you a $100,000 fine. The question of waterboarding raises the question of the Eighth Amendment, that cruel and unusual punishment. Scalia talked about that. Also, this guy's being shamed for stealing from the Walmart. I better look out about taking off with the Jolly Ranchers because of that. And then the question is, he doesn't look very happy. Is that a fair punishment? The shaming that he's getting there. Doesn't look very happy, does he? Okay, 14th Amendment, BED. Born in the USA. Anybody born in the United States is a citizen. So we got the question of kids whose parents have been deported, but they were born in the United States. Comes out of the Dred Scott case. We already said no person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. That's what all the civil rights laws were based on. Civil Rights Act is based on that. Civil rights movement is making that case. And then due process gets applied to the states by the 14th Amendment. There it is. So review that. You got acronym, memory device stuff going on there. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there because selective incorporation is kind of complicated. I think that, I'm not sure that's going to be my stopping point, but I'm going to stop it for now. Okay, now let's see if I can remember how to stop. I'm always afraid I'm going to keep this thing going for the next. I don't think that's it. Maybe over here.